First round, it's Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver from LSU. Our round one coverage presented by Cadillac. JP Shadrick with John Oehser upstairs at Everbank Stadium. Size, speed, production in the paint a lot at Tiger Stadium. He led FBS in receiving touchdowns a season ago. And Calvin Ridley's out. Brian Thomas Jr. is in.
Yeah, and it sort of stands to reason. If you weren't going to get one of the top three, Brian Thomas was the guy that most people thought had the ability to be the one out of the rest of the group. I thought corner all day. I thought corner for 2 or 3 months. But if they were going to get a wide receiver and have to move up, this was going to be the guy. And again, we're talking to analysts for the draft, talking to him at the combine. This was the guy beyond that group that went in the top 10 that you felt like had ability to develop and be a number one wide receiver at some point. Has to develop to get there. Won't come in as that, but has the potential to do it.
6'3", a little over 200 pounds, and tied for the third fastest 40-yard dash at the combine, 4.33. So he
and a pretty cool combination there, JP, because he can move like you're talking about. He also can go get contested balls. A lot of people, a lot of fans, and a lot of media observers have been wondering when they were going to get the jump ball guy. This guy can get contested passes.
38.5-inch vertical jump, to your point there, John. So he can get up in the air for sure, and he'll be a great addition for this offense. He was second on LSU's team in receptions last year. Of course, Malik Neighbors, who went earlier in this draft in the first round, had the most catches in yardage. But Brian Thomas Jr. comes away with 3 more touchdowns. They had a really good quarterback throw it to him who went in this first round as well. So the LSU offense comes through with a number of first-round picks tonight. But this fits, what this Jaguars offense really needs. A guy that can go down the field, like you said, contested situations. They've got Christian Kirk. They've got Zay Jones. They added Gabe Davis in free agency. Evan Ingram's here at tight end who can play wide receiver type roles. They've got weapons all over outside right now.
Yeah, and it's going to be, when you look at the history of the franchise, when you look at the next 4 or 5 years, huge storyline. Can they develop a number one wide receiver? Can they draft that guy, have him be the guy in a league right now where people feel like you need a guy? This team's never done that. So this will be a huge storyline for Brian Thomas. Can he come in and for a while be the guy who doesn't break the bank, eventually break the bank and be a guy who defines the organization? They've been looking for that at wide receiver in the draft for a long time. Right now, their wide receiver core is all free agents 5 years and up. He's the young guy.
LSU kind of claims that they're wide receiver U, and for good reason. They've had a lot of first-round picks come out of that school in the last 20 years only. We don't even go back further than that. Michael Clayton in 04. They had 2 of them in 07, Craig Davis and Dwayne Bowe. Odell Beckham Jr., might have heard of him in 2014. And, of course, most recently, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and earlier in this draft, Malik Neighbors, now Brian Thomas Jr. in the first round as well. And we'll see if he can live up to the expectations of some of the others.
Yeah, and 4 years ago, I would have said, wow, you're drafting a guy who already had a top 10 pick go in front of him. Can a school produce 2 big-time players like that? Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, clearly LSU is capable of doing it. Let's hope Brian Thomas is either one of those guys.
Yeah, that would be fantastic because they have put together fantastic careers already. Plenty ahead. Our coverage here on Jaguars.com and in the stadium at Everbank Stadium. Those who are still with us, thanks for hanging out tonight. It was a trade back to get to the 23rd pick from 17, where the Jaguars stayed there and ended up picking their guy, Brian Thomas Jr. And that was the big question. Would it be a corner or would it be a receiver? Or could it be something we didn't expect? But it ended up being the wide receiver position and Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, and let's take a moment, a little credit to Trent Baalke. At number 17, I was getting a lot of emails. Hey, what are they doing? Are they going to be able to get their guy? They traded back 6 spots. I think you can make the argument Brian Thomas still there, Terry and Arnold still on the board. I don't think there's any question they had their pick of a couple of guys they wanted and were able to pick up capital. Credit to them, I mean the Jaguars personnel people, for knowing how this board was going to break and for sensing it during the draft.
Well, the draft continues, and the next pick has not been announced yet. We'll keep you posted on some of the picks coming up, but the Jaguars have their man at wide receiver. And the Jags, at least in the past, at wide receiver in the first round, honestly haven't had a lot of success. Yes, past cannot tell you the future of what's going to happen, but you know, they've spent over the years, 4 different first-round pick wide receivers, and they really haven't had much success.
Well, it's something for us to discuss because it will be discussed. They also have not done that since 2012. Justin Blackmon was the last one, I believe. You had R.J. Soward at one point, Matt Jones, and I'm going to draw a blank. Yeah, so 4 guys, but it's been 12 years. So let's not really tie those in with, well, this team can't do this team can't develop this. It's a new era at the position. Yep. It's a completely new regime at the position. If it had been 3 years ago, then I think you have the discussion. With it being 12 years ago, it took me a while to remember when the last one was, and I've been doing it a minute.
Yeah, Justin Blackmon was the last one. For those at Everbank Stadium who hung out, thank you for coming tonight to the Duval Draft Party. Our coverage in the bowl will conclude. Thank you for coming. Let's go Jags, and we'll see you. I hope you enjoy the first-round pick in Brian Thomas Jr. Our coverage continues, though, on Jaguars.com and Jaguars YouTube, Jaguars social media after the first-round pick. It's Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU with the 23rd overall selection, the 5th time the Jaguars have selected in the first round a wide receiver in their history. It adds to the long history of LSU wide receivers in the first round. They've had a lot of success in later rounds as well. But for this Jaguars offense, and for Trevor Lawrence now, okay, you've got a couple of veteran offensive linemen that they've added this offseason. Ezra Cleveland signed. Mitch Morse now at center. They've extended the right guard and Sheriff. The left tackle is a veteran player, and, of course, second-year right tackle. That's fine. And now you add a piece on offense for Trevor Lawrence, who's been discussing contracts and things. He's got to have a big smile on his face right now.
Well, you would think so, and I think it's good for Brian Thomas in this sense. Sometimes a guy comes in, and referring back in the day to Justin when he came in, expected to be the number one right away and expected to be the star on offense right away, right? 12 years ago. Well, I don't think anybody this offense does not need Brian Thomas to come in week 1 and carry this team. He can have time to learn. He is becoming part of a very, what's the best way to put it, a unusually unselfish group of receivers. Christian Kirk, I don't know Gabe Davis that well, but I assume he's going to fit into this. Evan Ingram. I'm not sure I've ever been around a receiving group that I guess cares less if they're not the guy that day. So they are very willing to help this kid. It will be a good situation for him to come into. And I've seen far worse situations for a young wide receiver to come into where there are receivers around who don't necessarily want to help the younger guys. He won't have that issue with this bunch.
By the way, the next pick after the Jaguars, the Detroit Lions at 24, Terrion Arnold, cornerback.
Yeah, and that was the sweet spot. And the draft, I think, played out a lot like the pundits maybe thought it would, in the sense that Arnold, Thomas, and Quinyon Mitchell were all guys that people talked about being around 15 to maybe 18, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you had that 14 offensive players taken early.
Amazing.
Some guys shoved up. I thought a few linemen got drafted maybe before I thought they would. Had the effect of pushing everybody down 4 or 5 spots, and those guys who everybody thought were going to be there 15 through 18, well, they wound up going 22 through about 24, maybe 25.
That's how it works.
I think good for the Jags in that point.
I think so, because they had the options they were kind of looking at anyway, and they could move back. They netted a pick on top of it,
yep,
and to a next year's draft, and got their guy.
And that third, I think that's one that you will look and say, boy, the equity they got. To get a 3rd and 4th next year, we're not talking about it now, but to slide back, I think you can make a strong argument. Had they had to stick at 17, probably wouldn't have surprised you to take Brian. Wouldn't have surprised you to see them take Brian Thomas there as well. So you get 3 extra picks in this point for moving back 6 spots.
Right.
I always hesitate to say somebody want to trade because you got to see how these guys play out. But on paper, a lot of equity gain for a player that you, I would think, wanted anyway.
So, that said, the Jaguars have their wide receiver. The Green Bay Packers pick is in at 25. The Buccaneers are on the clock at 26. There are 32 first-round picks. We'll see if Trader Trent Baalke has anything else in mind tonight, too. You never know
It's
in some of these.
Awful tough. Where are they, 48?
That's right.
To go up and get to 32, that would be it'd be going a little bit.
That would be quite a coup if he could get that done. But
yeah, so, I mean.
We'll see. The night's not over.
No, it's not over, and neither is the draft. And I know we have all weekend to talk about the rest of the draft, but I thought they were going corner early. This certainly, you wonder if from 48 tomorrow, if they will try to go up and get a corner. There were guys available. It was considered a particularly deep draft at 3 areas, JP. It was offensive tackle, it was wide receiver, and it was corner. Maybe corner wasn't quite as deep as receiver and tackle, but it was deep into the second round. I would be very surprised if whenever we're talking tomorrow that we're not talking about a corner in round 2, but I was surprised tonight. So
that's right.
I can be surprised 2 nights in a row. I like surprises.
A lot of talk about adding some beef on one of the 2 lines as well at some point, so we got to see what happens. Here's what's remaining for the Jaguars in the 2024 NFL Draft as of this moment. Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU is the first-round pick, 48th overall in round 2, 96th overall in round 3. They've got 2 fourth-round picks, 114 and 116. They added a 5th-round pick in that trade, so they have 153 and 167, 212th in the 6th round, and then a 7th-round pick as well. So that means Saturday could be rather busy around here.
Yeah, and let's package 212 and 236 for Ham. It's fine. Just get rid of them.
Well, there you have it. That's what's coming up. More coverage coming up soon on Jaguars.com. We'll hear from Brian Thomas Jr. at some point this evening. He is in Detroit. Brian Sexton is chasing him down as we speak.
Sexton's got speed.
He does. Not as speedy as Brian Thomas Jr., let's hope. That's coming up a little later. So stay tuned to your Jaguars social media and much more from the Jaguars pick in the first round, 23rd overall. It's wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU.